Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify, and when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions, and best of all, it's totally free. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk. Big Ten, Big Ten, Big Ten, football talk.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim. We're talking Week 2 recap. We're going to recap all the events in the Big Ten, as well as a few things nationally. Also, we're going to start with some breaking news coming out of East Lansing. If you like the podcast, make sure to like, follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon Music. Leave a review. Send me an email, big10footballtalk@gmail.com. Follow us on social media, Instagram and X at Big Ten Football Talk. Those are the handles. I believe the X one is also at Zach Guggenheim if you want to follow me there. I'm going to just go ahead and start with kind of the big news in, I think, not just the Big Ten, but I think nationally in college football. Which is a very sad thing, which is the sexual harassment case that came out about Mel Tucker, Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker. I want to just give you a little information. I'm not going to talk too much about what I believe about the situation or anything like that. Just probably maybe give a little commentary on what it means for Michigan State as a program, because that's where it affects people the most. But to give you the skinny here, Mel Tucker, who's obviously, I believe, on his fourth year at Michigan State. He's on his second year of his new deal. He has been there's been an investigation, an ongoing investigation in East Lansing that has to do with a sexual harassment claim. The sexual harassment claim is by a sexual assault advocate. I guess you would call her Brenda Tracy, who, if you're familiar at all with her, she has a following. She is well known in the space of talking to college students about sexual assault. She was already a sexual assault survivor, and apparently there was some sort of thing that happened that Mel Tucker brought her in to talk to his players. And now there is an allegation that she has brought forth against him. Not going to say the specifics just for the sake of who might be listening to the show. It's graphic stuff though. And it's sad. And regardless, first of all, Mel Tucker is a married guy, so even if it was consensual, it's sad. If it wasn't consensual, it's downright deplorable. And I don't know what. Again, I'm not going to do a lot of commentary other than Mel Tucker has been suspended. Several reporters are stating their opinion that he's probably never going to coach at Michigan State again. And quite honestly, I think that's probably where this is heading, because at this point it's a he said, she said. And even if it was consensual, I think this is it's a terrible look for Michigan State, and I don't think it was. I think this is it's bad all the way around. Is my point, and it's gonna be it's gonna result in him getting fired, I think. And if he gets fired, it will be for cause. And so remember, he signed a 10-year, $95 million deal. That gets nullified if he's fired for cause. This is a firing for cause. At least I would imagine that it would be that. So in a sense, Michigan State gets out of a big contract, which I hate to talk about it in that way, but the reality is that because I don't want to talk about the specifics and about the morality other than it, regardless of whether it was consensual or not, it's wrong. It's just wrong. Okay. But I think there's also the reality that last year did not go well for Mel Tucker. And now he comes back. And I think people are wondering how in the world they're stuck with this contract. Well, now you have this awful, awful thing that happened off the field that is for cause. I already think you probably had, at least some folks probably had reason to get rid of him. This now accelerates that that process. I hate to say it that way because I feel like what I'm saying, it sounds like I'm saying, oh, this is Michigan State's excuse to get rid of him. I don't think it's quite that like that. I do think if Mel Tucker were 11-1 last year, I think it gets a lot harder to fire him from Michigan State's perspective. That being said, I think he should probably get fired from a morality perspective, from just the optics, the PR. I don't love it, and I think it's a terrible thing. Where does Michigan State go from here? What does Alan Haller, the athletic director, do? Well, they've already done a few things. He is suspended, and they have. This has been an investigation that's been ongoing. So this is not new. What's new is the public figuring out about it. There apparently throughout this, there was a no contact order for Tucker. There was increased oversight of the program as this was going. So it seems like they've done a lot of due process already, which I think is good because Mel Tucker can't really come back at them and be like, hey, what the heck? You didn't wait until all the facts came out. It seems like they have been reviewing it, and then there was a leak or someone got the story, and now they're making the decision to suspend as more and more information comes out. Harlan Barnett is going to serve as the interim head coach. He's a Michigan State assistant, so he's going to serve in that role. And then I think some very big news as well. Mark D'Antonio, former Michigan State head coach, maybe the best head coach in Michigan State history, is coming back as an associate head coach during his leave of absence. So I don't know what that means for the future. I doubt D'Antonio is back for the long term, but it seems like the Spartans have been at least preparing for this possibility for at least a few months now. So I don't think this takes them by surprise. I don't think they're acting too rashly. I think where you really start to get concerned, though, is the future, right? This is a conference that is only getting better and more competitive with more competitive teams, right? And Michigan State, last year was not very good. In 2020 was not very good. Not necessarily projected to do well, although they've looked better than I expected the first couple weeks. I think the timing of this from a competitive standpoint is really, really rough because of what's coming down the pike. And the reality is they're not, even though they've looked good, I don't think they're going to be a team that necessarily does well this year. Maybe more better than 500, maybe, but they're just in a beast of a division. So I just don't know what to make of it athletically. I think it's a bad time for something. It's always man, I say that like it's never, or it's that there could be a good time for this. It's never a good time for something like this. And for it to be at Michigan State where there's been a pattern of sexual misconduct, I'm sure it opens a lot of wounds. I'm sure it opens a lot of uh, just awful stuff. And so I recognize even in the first few minutes of this, I'm talking about this. I probably haven't been the most eloquent in talking about it. I just want to be clear. Maybe my main takeaways. One is that this is a horrendous thing that happened. If proven true. And I think it, in all indications, it's proving to be true. And so if it is true, it's a horrendous thing for someone to be violated like this. It's dehumanizing, it's demoralizing, and it's wrong. And there needs to be action taken. So from that perspective, I think, we want to do due process, we want to do all that stuff. But if it comes to light, and it seems like it has, that this is what's happened, Mel Tucker should be fired. At the same time, it stinks for Michigan State. It stinks for the student athletes and the fans, and to have to go through something like this again, as a program, as an athletic department. And so my heart goes out to the woman who has been harmed. And I think as well to the fans, the Spartan fans, who are affected by this, and the student athletes who are affected by this, because it's just a no-win situation. It's reality that transgressions like this never just hurt you. It's never just a solo thing. It really hurts a lot of people. And so it's a bummer. That was a lot more time than I wanted to take. The way I'm going to recap is I'm just going to go through my power rankings for the Big Ten. And through that, you'll kind of get my thought process through each team and each game. Northwestern is 14th, but they had a solid win on Saturday against UTEP. They won 38-7. It's tied at 7 in the first quarter, and I just thought, yep, Northwestern's going to blow this thing, just like I thought they would. And instead, they blew this game open in the third quarter. Ben Bryant, he got hurt in the second half, but he had an efficient day, 11 for 17, threw for a touchdown. Cam Porter had a good game, 17 carries, 90 yards. They ran for close to 200 yards in this game, and the defense played really well. Got 3 picks on UTEP. So UTEP is not a good team. I want to make that clear, but I thought Northwestern was going to lose this game. They won by 31. And so that's positive momentum for David Braun, the interim head coach there. I think it really gets the monkey off the back after everything that happened. Speaking of scandals and hard things at programs, this was really good for the Wildcats and for David Braun to get this first win. And it was more dominant than I expected. So, we'll see. I don't think this means much in terms of Northwestern's progress moving forward, but stranger things have happened. And as you'll see, I think the West continues to show it's maybe not as it might be more wide open than we think. So I've got Northwestern 14th, Nebraska. I have 13. they've got to find a different quarterback, because the reality is Nebraska, a lot of people are going nuts about Colorado and how great they were. And I think Colorado is a decent team. I doubt they are in the top 25 by the end of the season. There's too many good teams in the Pac-12, first of all. And also, they're not going to face another team that turns the ball over like Jeff Sims does. Like Sims, he's a walking turnover. And I don't mean any disrespect to him. I'm sure he's a good guy, but he's not a Power 5 quarterback, at least not right now. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but he is turnover prone. And I think I saw it was 4 turnovers, unforced turnovers by Nebraska. Completely changed the game. Completely changed the game. They were better on the offensive and defensive line, but it doesn't matter if your quarterback can't handle a snap and he's fumbling all day long. So Nebraska's got a quarterback problem. And I'll say to the Nebraska fans, have patience with Matt Rule. I think, everybody after the game was saying, well, Matt Rule didn't get guys like Deion Sanders did. Deion has an unfair advantage that his son is the star quarterback, and he recruited Travis Hunter at Jackson State. They're both in similar rebuilds. It's just that, to borrow a phrase from Jim Harbaugh, one was born on third base. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way to Deion Sanders. It's just Matt Rule wasn't going to get a guy like Shadur Sanders because he didn't have a connection. And you know what? If Deion's son, if he didn't have a really elite quarterback or a really good quarterback that was his son, I don't think Colorado would be here either. So just remember, when you're comparing Matt Rule and Deion had some built-in advantages. Okay. Now, I think Deion can coach as well. But Matt Rule has proven that he can coach and that he can build teams up. It's just, this is a long-term rebuild. And I know Nebraska fans don't want to hear that, but it's a long-term rebuild. So he needs more than 2 games, and he needs another quarterback for sure. 12, I got Indiana. I thought they had a good bounce back. I'm glad they committed to Taven Jackson. They did what you're supposed to do against an overmatched opponent. They won 41-7 over Indiana State. They started fast. I think the 7 points that they had was, I believe, from a pick 6. So the defense played really well. I'm curious to see how Indiana's defense continues to do and continues to evolve, because I think they might be a little bit better than I expected. So I've got them at 12 for now, but we'll see. Rutgers at 11. Rutgers, I don't know what to make of their win over Temple, because that game was pretty close for a good chunk of the game, and then Rutgers really pulled away. And then, I mean, they dominated Northwestern, and Northwestern came out with a dominant win over UTEP particularly in the second half. But this game was 13-0 into the fourth quarter. They turned EJ Warner over twice, so they allowed a lot of passing yards, but it didn't hurt them at all. They were able to run the ball like crazy against Temple. Kyle Monangai, 165 yards. On 28 carries. He was great. Wimsatt was all right. He threw for almost 200 yards. So his yards per attempt was good, but I'd like to see him be more efficient, which I think is his weakness right now. But again, it's weird to know where Rutgers is as a program right now. They're 2-0, 2 dominant wins, 2 double-digit wins. Where is this team as a program? I really want to know more about this team, and we'll get there. We'll get there. Obviously, they'll play some teams in the East that will challenge them more than Temple. I've got Purdue 10th, and I told you Purdue was going to beat Virginia Tech. Now, my feeling about Syracuse has changed a little bit. I think Syracuse is a better team than Virginia Tech, but I think it's at home. But again, I thought Hudson Card was going to be the better quarterback over Grant Wells. Grant Wells threw 2 picks. Purdue ran the ball, I thought, fairly well. Devin Maccabee, 21 carries for 95 yards. Hudson Card, their rushing average is down a little bit. I think part of that was Hudson Card running and getting sacked. And I think they also, they had 3 kneel downs for -5 yards. So it impacted the rushing total. But again, I think if you're a Boilermaker fan, it's a big thing. I know Virginia Tech's not great, but to go to Lane Stadium to get a win there, I thought was really good. So I've got Purdue at 10. Illinois, I have 9. Illinois got that score is not as close as you think it is. And I know I already have angered I've already angered Illinois fans. It was 28-7 at the half. Kansas was dominant in that game, and Illinois came back late, had a chance to at least, maybe get it to a 1-score game. Altmaier threw a pick at the end of that game. But the reality is you take away a 72-yard run from Altmaier, which was a big touchdown run he had in the second half. You take that run away, it's 27 carries for 67 yards. Like we're talking 2.5 yards a carry. And that is very concerning. Now, Reggie Love had 8 carries for 45 yards. McCray had 4 carries for 20 yards. But again, they had a couple of 10, 11-yard runs, and then it's a lot of nothing. You compare that to Kansas running the ball. Devin Neal averaged 12 yards a carry. Highshaw averaged close to a little over 8 yards a carry. Illinois' got problems on the lines. I thought Illinois would be stronger on the lines. They were not. And Kansas was easily the better team. I still like Altmaier. I think Altmaier, despite the 2 picks, he's a good player. But I have my doubts about Illinois after losing everyone that they did on the back end. And I'm concerned about their line play right now. I trust Bielema over a guy like Ryan Walters to get it fixed and to help them gel. But right now, Illinois is not a top 25 caliber team like maybe some people thought. Kansas, I think, might be. Kansas actually looks really good. But I think Illinois got some work to do. I've got Minnesota 8. Minnesota, it was ho-hum. I wish Kaliak Manis looked better against a not great team. There were moments in this game where I thought, is this going to be a PJ Flex special where they blow this game? They did not. And so I am grateful for that. They pulled away and they did work on the running game like I thought. Darius Taylor came in, 33 carries for 193 yards, a touchdown. Sean Tyler had a good game, 17 carries, 93 yards. I'm curious why they pulled Tyler. I'm not sure if there's an injury because I didn't get a chance to watch the whole game. But Minnesota's defense played really, really well in this game. Held them to 152 total yards. So again, good showing for the defense. Still very concerned about the offense, but Minnesota, at least from a defensive perspective, the only touchdown they've allowed is on that crazy trick play that shouldn't have worked against Nebraska. So 3 field goals and a weird trick play that should have gone wrong are the only points that they've allowed so far as a defense. So good on them. I got Michigan State 7. They beat up an FCS team, which they should have done, but they dominated like they should. It was 38-0 going into the fourth quarter, and then Richmond scored a couple of junk touchdowns. So they did what they're supposed to do. Noah Kim continues to look good. 18 of 22, 292 yards, 3 touchdowns. So good on him. Maryland at 6. I turned this game on. I think, in the first 5 minutes and saw 14-0 Charlotte and thought, uh-oh. And then I think Maryland, they were composed. They didn't let the pick six really get to them. And I thought they played good ball after that. Charlotte probably had a few more explosive plays than I would like. I think that's going to be something that they go back and work on. But, when Tagovailoa plays clean ball, he's, I think, a top 5 quarterback in the league. And, Roman Hemby had a great game, averaged 8 yards a carry, had a touchdown. Again, I think underrated receiving core. So I think this is a good team. They got to make sure that they avoid, Tagovailoa being loose with the ball. So I've got Maryland at 6, Wisconsin at 5. I was very disappointed in the Badgers. I thought Wisconsin was a legitimate playoff contender. Listen, I thought Tanner Mordecai played a pretty good game. He was not the most efficient, but, completed over 60% of his passes, threw for nearly 300 yards, 278. He got no help from the running game. Braylon Allen, 7 carries, 20 yards. Ches Malusi, 12 carries for 49 yards. I mean, they only ran the ball 29 times. And I think part of the reason why is because it was not working. It just was not working. And Washington State was up early, 24-6 at half. At that point, you almost kind of have to abandon the run game. And so Washington State got them out of the run game, which is what they want to do, but also they could not run the ball. Like, it was just hard for them all night. They're barely averaging 3 yards a carry. And that's concerning because I think Washington State's I think they're a good team. I don't think they're going to be anything special in the Pac-12. Now, the Pac-12 is proving itself to be, I think, a very good conference. So I think it's very possible that Washington State is a top 25 caliber team, but might finish 5th or 6th in the conference. That being said, if you're Wisconsin, I don't know what you do after this because you're going to face better teams in Washington State. And I think teams that can throw the ball and teams that are dynamic, that have playmakers, they're going to see this film and they're going to be like, oh, we can exploit Wisconsin because their defense, I thought their defense played a really good third quarter, but then the rest of the game, I just felt like they were undisciplined and slow, and they can be exploited, which I was surprised by. And I think the offensive line has a lot of work to do. So I do have them at 5. I honestly, I think it's a drop. It's a pretty significant drop between 1, 2, and 3 and the rest. And I think it might be a significant drop after 4. And my number 4 team's Iowa. Iowa, they were up 17-0, I believe, at the half. Let me just double check that. Sorry, 17-3 at the half. It looked closer than it was. It's 20-13. The reality is it was 20-3. And then Iowa State got 10 points in the fourth quarter. McNamara played, I thought, clean for the most part, had the 1 pick, but he didn't need to do much. Iowa, I thought, ran well enough in the first half, and then they kind of just shut it down again. I think Brian Ferentz has like 3 good offensive calls a game, which is concerning, especially when your job, it's in your contract that you have to score 25 points a game. So he's averaging 3 points. He's averaging 3 points too little right now. So he needs to get on that. But I think Iowa has pieces that other teams don't. Like I looking at Wisconsin, I don't think they have a playmaker or a couple playmakers in the passing game like Iowa does with the tight ends. Luke Lachey, Eric All, both I think are big time tight ends, and I don't think Wisconsin has that, even with DK at receiver and some of the other guys they have. I think Iowa has more matchup problems for teams than Wisconsin does. So I like Iowa. They have to score more points. I mean, they can't get to 20 and then sit on it, but they knew that they could get to 20 and beat Iowa State in this. So number 3, I've got Ohio State. My biggest concern with the Buckeyes actually was not offense. They had 9 offensive drives, not including a kneel down at the end of the game. Ohio State scored, I think, 5 touchdowns and had 4 punts. And a lot of that was the second half. They weren't really trying. Like they were rotating quarterbacks. And so in the first half, 4 touchdowns to 2 punts. And I thought that I'm like, against a team that's trying to get their offensive line to gel and all that, it's fine. I think I'm still concerned about the running game, but I think the offensive line starting to figure out a little bit more. Where I'm most concerned for Ohio State is the defensive line and their lack of push up front, both from pass rush as well as against the running game. I thought Youngstown State, they looked like they could do business both on the ground and the quarterback had time. If the quarterback's more accurate, I think this is a closer game. And that's against an FCS opponent. So I think there's real problems. I think Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau are they're not living up to the 5-star billing. And I thought they would, and they're not. So it's still early, but yeah, I don't see the defensive production that I thought we would in a game like we saw. So I've got them at Ohio. I've got them at number 3. I think there's a significant gap between number 3 and number 2, and that's my number 2 team is Penn State. Penn State did what you're supposed to do against an FCS team. Blew them out. 63-7. No excuses about clock or anything like that. They just took them to the woodshed. And then Michigan, number 1. I'll just say this. I may have spoken too soon about the QB1 in the conference. JJ's playing really, really well. Now, it's UNLV, and I know the score doesn't look impressive, but Michigan's not out to score 40 or 50. They just want to run you over and get their win, and they did. And that they only let UNLV score at the last part of the game. So I think Michigan is clearly the number 1 team in the country right now. They're the number 1 team in the conference right now. I just think they're complete everywhere. And I think JJ takes them over the top. So those are my power rankings. Let me just talk about the top 10 nationally. I've got Bama at 10. I think all the reports that Nick Saban's dynasty is done need to stop. That the Texas game, Texas was great on Saturday. They were phenomenal. So this is not a knock against Texas, but the reality is it was a 10-point win, and a lot had to go wrong for Bama and a lot had to go right for Texas for them to win by 10. Now, granted, Texas had some miscues too, but Bama, Milroe threw that or stared down a couple of guys that led to picks. I didn't think the offensive play calling was all that great. They were playing true freshmen in the secondary. Caleb Downs, who got beat for a touchdown or 2 in that game. It was his second game. And so that's not to take away anything from Texas, but rather it's to say, listen, Bama is playing a quarterback that is green and they're still learning how to use. They have young pieces in the secondary, and Bama still could have won that game. So I think I'm still on the lookout for them to run the table the rest of the way and win the SEC and get to the playoff. I don't think I'm not picking that, but every year that I pick against Bama, they end up in the playoff. So I just think reports that Nick Saban's dynasty is over like people saying that they have the most talent in college football. And I know certain guys online, they'd argue that Georgia does. Even if Georgia does, they're one of the top two in terms of overall talent. So number 9, I still have Oregon State. I just, I think they're playing really well right now. I don't have USC in this, by the way. I do not buy USC's defense, and I don't think they've played anybody. And I just think their defense is not very good, and I don't buy them. So I know Caleb Williams is great, but I don't think they're a top 4 team in their conference right now. Maybe they're 4th, but I've got several other teams in their own conference ahead of them right now. 8, I have Ohio State. I'm very tempted to drop Ohio State out of the top 10 right now because I think they just look very, very inconsistent. I am looking forward to seeing what happens if Kyle McCord is established as the starter, to see what happens. They play, I think, a decent Western Kentucky team this week. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I've got them at 8. Notre Dame at 7. Beat North Carolina State at North Carolina State by 21. I think Notre Dame's for real this year. I think Sam Hartman is a really good quarterback. I think they've got some guys at receiver that I think are better than they had a year ago. I think their defense has improved from a year ago. I very likely am calling the upset in week 4 for Notre Dame over Ohio State. I think Notre Dame's really good this year. Washington at 6, they did what they're supposed to do. Penn State at 5 did what they're supposed to do. Georgia at 4. They haven't played anybody and they've looked a little sluggish. So I still think Georgia is really, really good. I just don't have them at 1 this week or 2. Texas at 3. I think they deserve to be at 3. I think Quinn Ewers looks great. I think Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell, it's a really good receiving core. And their defensive line, man, they're going to give everybody problems on their defensive line. They're just massive and they're studs. Right now, I think they have an inside track, obviously, to get to the playoff. I think they're really, really good. Michigan at 2. What a playoff game that would be, Michigan versus Texas, with Michigan's offensive line and Texas's defensive line. Oh, that'd be good. And I've got Florida State at 1. I still seeing what Florida State did to LSU. I think LSU, I don't know. I think Bama is a little bit better than LSU, but LSU might be a matchup problem because of Jaden Daniels. So I like Florida State, and Florida State pulled away in a way that Texas did not. So I've got Florida State at 1 for the time being, but it's fun. I mean, this is the most variation, I think, in a college football season that we've had in a long time. Like, Ohio State is out of the top 4 in the AP and in my rankings. Alabama's out of the top 4 right now. We're talking about Florida State. We're talking about Texas. We're talking about Penn State. We're talking about Washington. We're talking about Notre Dame. And I know a lot of people are talking about USC. This is an exciting time for college football. So it'll be fun. It's week 2. A lot can happen. So thanks for joining me on the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. We'll be coming at you with picks next week, or not next week, on Thursday morning, either Thursday morning or Friday morning, whenever I can get that out. But appreciate you guys. Thanks for listening. Take care. God bless.